Okay. Okay, we got the 5 reasons. We got this. Okay. We talked about that last week, and oh well. Actually, let's try and get the Q&As done this week, because we almost completely ignored them last week. And this one is actually a new Q&A. I don't actually know on this. I don't know if either one of you know. It's like, this was, can Compiz finally do VSync with NVIDIA ATI and NVIDIA GPUs without a problem? Apparently this person was having, you know, I know what they're talking about. On some systems, if you enable Compiz, they lag like heck. Like, you actually see the frames changing. If you rotate the cube, you like see the whole thing come apart, and you see the individual frames go by the screen, and so on and so forth. I haven't had this problem, with the exception of the box Jordan's actually on, which has a really crappy shared graphics NVIDIA card, which was optimized specifically for Windows. And this system just isn't happy. Every other system we have here, including the POS that you're on, Commodore, has never had a problem with anything we've thrown at Linux. I'm guessing this is if you have an overly proprietary ATI or NVIDIA card driver.
I've definitely seen some tearing with my NVIDIA driver. Okay. I think a lot of it has to do with X. Because part of the point of Wayland, when it's coming, is to make sure that every frame is perfect, so tearing should not be a problem anymore. A lot of the point was that X was never really designed to be a desktop system. It was never designed to be anything more than a networked graphics system.
Damned if we haven't got a lot of use out of what it wasn't designed to be.
Yeah, it's all about taking what you've got and working with it.
Yeah. Like, and I do agree with that. Well, on that, I've heard things about that on and off. Is there like an ETA for when we should expect that to be being pushed out?
Shuttleworth says that, he said probably 4 to 5 years before it becomes a default, I think. But 11.10, they might have a version available. Fedora is working on one as well. Or maybe they're working together, I don't know.
Okay.
But hopefully before October.
Okay, because the other thing that this directly relates to is if you've ever tried to do VNC through a Linux box, it's like you have the tear. Now the VNC is not a graphics issue. It's more related to what you were talking about with the X and so on. But I do kind of want to see that fixed, because those really are the make or break on a Linux box, to have all those little lovely wobbly effects and everything working. And if they're not smooth and just seamless, they're more annoyances than improvements to the UI. Yes, Skype. Thank you, Skype.
That's why I turned off all the notifications.
Yes, I'm going to turn that off right now. I have a single button to do that. It's called the mute key. Okay. So it sounds like, unfortunately, the answer you got to give that guy is no, but we're working on it. Be patient.
And the thing is, like I was saying, they might end up with a workable version before 11.10. I'm still sort of predicting, hoping that by 12.04, by the next long-term support release, that they will have a version ready. But conservatively, it'll probably be 12.10 before they have it ready. They wouldn't want to switch entirely for long-term, I would hope.
And you have to port all your X11 stuff to Wayland, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, depending on the individual distro and the manpower and the resources, could be done in 3 weeks, or it could be done in 4 years.
Individual projects like Wine or Skype or whatever, you know.
Yeah, they're all going to have to add
stuff. They would have to get done libraries and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's like, call me crazy. I hope for a world someday where we don't need wine. Wine is very useful. Wine is very useful, but I'd like not to need it. I really would. I prefer native apps. They're just so much better. It's like, well, wine does let me get work done. I take it neither one of you are really that familiar with CAD or AutoCAD?
Not entirely.
Okay.
Isn't that what school uses?
Well, it's like I've already answered this guy, but I didn't know if y'all had a better answer on it. What they were asking is because they were looking for, because there's no Linux version of AutoCAD, for architectural stuff, and that's what they did. I suggested Linux CAD to them, which I guess we'll have to put a link in the show notes for this file for that. It's actually, as far as I have compared it over the years, all but on par with AutoCAD. It can infringe on certain patents and other things, but it's a very comparable CAD program. This is one of those things, they need a commercial software that doesn't think they want to buy it because they're on Linux, which is one of the weaknesses when it comes to Linux. It's called, yes, hi, corporation, I have money. Can I give it to you? No! You must not use free software. It is evil. You are not a customer. You are the devil. Die!
You are a cancer.
And now we cut that section out and we loop it.
Well, no, it's like, you honestly have to wonder the logic with some of these things. It's like, you look at some of the things they go out of their way to develop for that are actually smaller market shares than Linux, but yet they don't want to sell anything to Linux people. It's like, what, just because I have a tux, my money is no good? Like, it's like,
no, that's the thing. As the Ubuntu Software Center becomes more and more prevalent, I have a feeling a lot of these companies that have been avoiding Linux for that reason, that we don't want their money because they don't want to give us money. Now there's a more viable solution to that, I guess.
Well,
yeah, but it might be an Ubuntu only
yeah,
thing.
no, see, that's my concern with that. There's already enough confusion that Linux does not necessarily equal Ubuntu, and just because Ubuntu can't do it doesn't mean Linux can't do it. There's already enough confusion on that. The last thing I want to see is commercial software like Photoshop or Rosetta Stone or certain games come to Linux but be Ubuntu only.
Yeah.
It's like that's
so
like
many other companies make software for Linux and sell software for Linux, and they're not one distro or another specific. A lot of them have installers that are just .run files, .sh files.
And that's exactly what that's exactly how it should be done. It should be
a shell script.
Yeah, it should be done in a self-contained shell script where it doesn't really care what the distro is. It's just it's self-contained.
Binary.
Yeah, I bought the thing. I put my key in. Off I go, just like I always do with an exe, or I forget what the. Oh, you're gonna have to remind me. What's the Mac installer file?
GMG app file, the folder.
Right. And there's no reason it can't be like that on Linux, except they don't want to do it. And the thing.
But then I have to make an RPM and deb for everything. I guess I wouldn't take that long to recompile, but I feel like, yeah.
Well, and like Jordan's saying, you could just do the shell script.
I guess.
And then you don't even have to worry about package management system and stuff they're using. If you make it self-contained. One of the real holdups for this is that a lot of most software people don't want to. This is really a problem. This isn't so much a problem with stuff that is both Mac and Windows. The real problem for a lot of things that are Windows only. Like, I'll give you an example. If you have some kind of media software suite that you pay $100, $150 on, odds are it needs Windows Media Player to run. It's Windows Media Player add-on. It's not really a completely self-contained separate piece of software. That stuff will never run on Linux, because they'd have to completely go back to it and make it work for something like like MPlayer or some other Linux media player, and that's not going to happen. Good, well self-contained software like Photoshop, for the most part Rosetta Stone, things like that, it's just a minor platform shift. It's not a, oh dear God, arm and a leg. It's just they don't want to do it. And something to note is there's a number of companies that already do this. I find where the void is an average end user stuff. High end stuff, like you would think, if Linux people only want free or cheap, this is stuff that nobody should never exist on Linux. Okay, World of Warcraft.
Yeah, Linux isn't paying good money for that.
Yeah, oh no, I still find it hysterical that games are not on Linux. Because Linux are more or less, a large chunk of the Linux users are geeks. I don't mean... Yeah, I don't mean to, stereotype the geek person, but the majority of gamers happen to also be technophiles. And I would suspect that there's the number of people who are willing to shell out $5 to $15 to $50 a month to play an MMORPG of some type. I would think there's probably a good number of those people on Linux. They go, well, I saved $150 by not buying Windows for my custom-built system. I have a year of whatever, free of charge.
The thing about installing World of Warcraft online is they think you're a hacker just because you say you're running Linux and playing World of Warcraft. They think you're a hacker.
Okay. But anyways, as I was saying before, you brought up World of Warcraft, which in my opinion isn't even one of the better MMORPGs. There's so many better ones, damn it.
I have to reach for the box.
Oh, no.
Hasn't been touched in 3-4 years.
I'm surrounded. No, but the logic is, or at least the argument they use is, Linux people only want free stuff. They don't want to pay for software. Well, then how come things like Maya sell rather well on Linux? This is not cheap software by any stretch of the imagination. And I find that most of the stuff that's made for Linux, it's like your high-end stuff. It's like
Shake before Apple bought it.
Well, yeah, but there's like $2,500 plus software, and
It's cheaper on the Mac now, so it'd be more logical for Mac users to buy it, but Shake is dead now, even for the Mac.
Well, it wasn't all that to begin with. It's I don't know, but it's so. It's clearly Linux users are willing to pay for software. It's just it's one of those we're not willing to pay for crapware. So, okay, this is a good question actually to wrap up with. Question 3. This guy was asking an opinion, and this was asking an opinion of the Linux people over here. Say they're using Windows 7 Pro 64-bit right now. They feel it's running perfect and don't have any problems with it so far. They're just wondering overall what we think about Windows 7. This isn't particularly a Linux question, but it's something worth going into. My personal opinion is, if you're happy with it, you should try Linux if you're willing to. But do you need to? No. I don't particularly like Windows 7 myself. That being said, it's not like it's an oh dear god piece of shit OS that some fanboys want to make it out to be.
It's just not my cup of tea.
It's not my cup of tea in the UI, and it does some things that, for the way my stuff is set up, would annoy the hell out of me. A good example is the home groups. The way Windows 7 just kind of tries to take over the network and things like that. However, if you're not in a multi-OS environment and you're not dealing with legacy systems, that's a non-issue. And the fact that Windows 7 comes in and actually tries to hijack that in a way that is really only compatible with other Windows 7 and Vista machines does make some rather technical stuff click the button in a way that there is at least a base level of security. I don't know what your experience with that features are, Jordan, because I know you have to unfortunately play with Windows 7 on a daily basis too.
Yeah.
I feel your pain. I'm using Windows 7 right now.
Now, for the last 2 years, I've been using Windows XP at work. In the last 2 months, they've switched me to Windows 7, or made me switch to Windows 7.
Yeah.
And honestly, the same hardware is running Windows 7 about 10 times better than it ran XP, surprisingly enough.
Yeah.
The performance is great. A lot, like you were saying, a lot of the settings have been changed in a very odd way. They were changed in Vista. They were changed a little bit even again in 7.
Right.
Making things a little more obscure, a little more difficult. I don't know. Performance-wise, it's like I said, a lot better. I still just prefer Linux for the customizability. There is more customizability, but it's really not a whole lot more than what you get by adding like Google gadgets or something.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's more than you've ever got in Windows.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But
out of the box, it is a lot more.
Yeah, but it's one of those things, and if your only taste of computers has ever been Windows, you'd have to be, oh dear God, impressed out of the box with Windows 7. If you're just a little bit of a techie person, but not really a geek person, there's a lot of tools that are included with Windows 7, like certain file system diagnoses and other things. Just things we've had for years, but it's like now they're actually included as part of Windows.
Now what would Grandma think about this, the average end user?
Say that again?
Now what would Grandma think of the average end user about Windows 7 compared to XP?
That sure is shiny.
That's going to honestly depend on the average end user and how they did things. There are some key UI changes in Windows 7 that, if you can get used to them, do make sense. The question is, can you get used to them?
And the absent the Mac problem that you had.
Well, yeah, it's like it's what he's getting at. Before we started the show, we were talking about somebody who has been using computers for 40 some odd years. Because of the way Windows 7 combines the open applications and the quick launch, they were clicking IE. They had an open window, and they closed all their IE windows, and they still saw the IE logo down there, so they'd go down and click IE. Like, why is it still... And I watched them do it 20 times. They'd, like, open it, exit, open it, exit, open. Why are you still open? I've closed you! There's nothing else. They thought it was still running. It was so... it's like... And it had never occurred to me that anyone could make this mistake, but then they explained their logic to me, and I'm like... Okay, I follow your logic. It's like,
yeah, the exact opposite problem with Windows 10.
Yeah, there's some things like that in there. However, all of them make sense. You get what Microsoft's logic was for them. So it's like I bash on them some partly because I'm pro Linux and partly because I'm one of those people they actually annoy because of the way I preferred to do things in Windows, and now I can't do them that way anymore. But at the end of the day, you cannot please 100% of the users. You can't do it. You have to draw the line somewhere. You can't add new technology without breaking some old technology. You have to find that happy medium. I'm not sure they did it, but at the end of the day, that's going to honestly depend on what the user is looking for. If you're not happy with those changes, you might want to be looking at switching to either Linux or OS X. And see if it suits the way you want to do things more.
The funny thing is, and it's kind of off topic, but the time I've spent on Windows 7 at work, I keep finding myself going and looking and thinking, man, I wish there was a good free video editor for Windows.
Yeah.
That's one of the things Linux gets a lot of flack about. There's no good video editors.
That's funny.
Video editing on Linux.
That's funny. Both these shows are edited in Linux. All your stuff, all of my
free video editors I found are Movie Maker.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of free ones, but they're either they don't run on about 50% of systems, or they're just so much less. And it's like, I mean, realistically, a video editor on par with something like Kdenlive, which is free in Linux, on Windows, is gonna set you back about $100.
Yeah.
It's just, if you're spending less than $100, why there's plenty of like $20 video editors for Linux. they're honestly a waste of money. I see me for Windows. It's like
in doing the research at work, I found Sony Vegas and Adobe Premiere Elements that were acceptable alternatives, though they did things in some really screwed up roundabout ways. It could just be because I'm, of course, from Kdenlive first, and they were $60 to $100.
Yeah. Another alternative, since I can't believe we're giving out advice on buying stuff for Windows, but another one to look at would actually be ULEAD Video Studio. It's a little bit more, but
Never heard of it.
for the way editing usually works in Windows, it doesn't have multiple timelines, but it has a lot of good features, transitions, the ability to accelerate silent video. It's largely intuitive, capture shot, and it is very intuitive, and it's around the same price point. It's usually, depending on which version, whether it's one back or the latest and greatest, priced between $79 and $150, but it is worth the money for it usually.
Now what about Power Director? That's what I use in Windows, but I use like a dumbed down OEM version.
I don't have any actual experience with it.
Well, it does have GPU acceleration. Like, it can use ATI Stream and NVIDIA CUDA to speed up the video editing.
Okay.
So the video card actually does something.
Well, see, I would argue that why I agree that's where all the technology is going. That's a feature more a geek cares about. When it comes to a video editor, what the average end user cares about is can I find the settings? Does it have all the codecs and preset templates loaded so that I can render a file my iPod can play, that my Zoom can play, that's compatible with the internet, or that...
I would almost argue that the average end user, the quote-unquote average end user, wants to be able to open something, drag their clip into it, drag it in, make a couple of cuts, hit render, and be done.
Right. And like...
For free, I'm not seeing that on Windows.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that, well, it does cost, like it or not, it does cost money to develop for Windows. Because you have to get...
For average, I would guess Movie Maker could probably get most of that done. I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube that are done in Movie Maker.
Oh, I think that's the... Well, I haven't had good experience with Movie Maker. Is it Movie Maker or there's some other one? I'll find it. If I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But there's some... Oh, is it Open Movie or something like that? There's some open source video editor cross-platform.
Virtual Dub?
No.
VLMC is in the works, but not done yet.
That might be what I'm thinking about.
Lightworks is now in the beta.
Right.
And it's broken.
Yeah, that's what... It's like, I haven't honestly been able to recommend any of these, but there's been a trend lately that a lot of open source projects that grew up in Linux are porting themselves over to Mac and Windows. And I think it's a good thing for these users, that they get to benefit from all the development that goes on in this thing they hate.
That's sort of how a lot of people end up converting. They start using a couple of pieces of free and open source software, Firefox, Thunderbird.
Realize it doesn't suck.
And then it's like, wait a minute, these things that I'm using on a day-to-day basis are available on Linux too. What else do I use on Windows that has alternatives? And then eventually it's all open source software, all free software, whatever it is. Maybe even proprietary software that runs on Linux.
Well, and it's like, honestly, when you start getting used to the alternatives, especially when it comes to Linux, like I'll give you an example. There's actually a Linux version of Winamp, but it's pretty much a dead project because the majority of the media players on Linux are just so much more than Winamp that it's like...
XMMS.
Yeah, it's like, why do I actually need Winamp for Linux? It's like...
But the best media player, music player, in my opinion, is for Windows. It's Foobar 2000. Have you heard of it?
Not particularly.
Foobar 2000 is awesome. It plays anything. MP3, FLAC, it plays SID files, it plays Atari files, it plays MIDI. There's an ad-lib emulator plugin. There's a whole bunch of crap for it.
So basically it does what Windows Media Player is supposed to do when it goes, I don't have the codecs for this. Can I talk to the internet?
Not really. You go to the website, you go to the components part, they'll play anything when you download the components. You download DLL file, put in a special folder.
Okay.
That sounds. You don't do anything.
That sounds like a not straightforward install, but I know.
It's kind of like the Firefox of media players, but not really.
Okay.
And I think the UI is open source and all the stuff like that, but the core is BSD. Or is it the other way around?
Well, no, I'm noticing that too. And that's something I have
like
mixed.
Proprietary and part is BSD.
No, that's something I'm having mixed feelings apart. I've noticed more and more, especially on a lot of free stuff coming to Windows, that it's basically running a virtual machine that's either running a very pseudo BSD or Linux to make this software work over here, because it doesn't really work with Windows, but they made an exe that creates this virtual environment. It's a little resource intensive, but modern systems can handle that little bit of extra resource intensive.
I've seen a couple of things that include a light version of Cygwin and rely upon it heavily.
Yeah, it's like, and I'm like, it's one of those things I have very mixed feelings about, because I'm like, you know, this would be so much better experience if you could actually get people to try it over here, but on the same token, I think it's a good thing that they are getting to benefit from that. It's just the reality is the average user is never going to realize where that came from, and that it's depending on that, and that it's like as a matter of fact, the biggest hindrance to this running smoothly is the fact that it's running on a Windows box. So I don't know. Okay, sounds like we've gone through all of that stuff. Anything else we want to talk about, or do we just want to kind of chime off here about, probably at about 2, maybe 3 parts?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
I think I'm fine.
Okay.
Laters.
We'll see y'all next Boya. Oh, there's something I need to talk with you about before you take off, Jordan. I don't want to talk about it on the air until I know I can get everybody on the channel on board. But
okay.
Hopefully if Jordan's on board and Philip's on board, next week there's going to be a really demented challenge between this channel and the YouTube community to try and make us suffer. Peace out all.